hey, I'm the bottleneck of the organization. You don't want to build something to double your revenue if it only adds 10% to your profit. Then the CEO starting to realize, hey, I used to be the founder, owner, operator that does everything. Now I'm the person that everybody asks questions to. What do we have strategically in plan to re-equip or reconfigure the profit recipe or the volume or the team in these areas so that they can stop holding the company back? And when we get into that sort of multi-entity, multi-location, or multi-product environment, need specific tricks to sort of give you a key to the health of each part of the system.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now, let's get it started. Hey, this is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I'm the managing partner at Epiphany Business Consulting and your host today. In our studio, we welcome Ryan Holden. Ryan, how are you today, man?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
Awesome. We are grateful for you. I am grateful for you. We had a little technical difficulties, mix-ups, but Ryan was just so gracious with his time. So I'm thankful for that. So let's get into it. Ryan, tell the audience a little bit about you. Who are you? What you do? What do you love?
I do. So I sort of built my career in accounting for a family-owned business that had a couple different business lines. The way that it ended up, I got to do a lot of my work in some of the smaller businesses, which led to me sort of splitting time between some different roles, still all in services, but getting a couple different vantage points about businesses. One that was a little bit more startup style and one was a little bit more mature. But anyway, seeing that, I got to see a mix of like a bigger corporate structure of the mothership, but then also the smaller business teams that were working in these smaller, $2 to $10 million a year revenue businesses. Then as some industry things hit, there led to some disruption. I moved on from that, but then that sort of helped gear me towards having this mix of accounting background and also some of the financial analysis and sort of help see the big picture, help some of those sales managers, operations managers at the business level run things. And then, for the last year, 2 years now, I've been working with a couple clients, a couple that have sort of stayed on and been regulars, a dozen or so projects here or there, to sort of help companies that are in a similar stage where they're not small enough that they're just laser focused on one customer avatar, one distribution channel, one product line, one location, but they started to branch out a little bit, and that complexity has brought them to a place where the CEO founder no longer has that intuitive feel of overall business, and they starting to build in some of the tools. So that's where I am professionally, and love just sort of helping jump into that space and help put some of the pieces together so that lack of clarity can be fixed through some of the tools that maybe more corporate America has a little more developed, but applying it in a way that can be a little bit more seamless and sort of catch that business up to where they need to be now that they've sort of moved away from that very small business mindset or approach, and now more into what might be considered like a lower middle market type place where they're starting to get or head in the direction of $5 million, $10 million plus annual revenue, and needing to have a little bit more going on there.
Yeah. What drove you into like accounting? And what I mean by that is, like, I talk to people that are accountants, bookkeepers, and they use that phrase, I just love numbers. I mean, what's your thing?
So for me, ever since I was a preteen, like middle school even, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I read a few other, half a dozen other books like that, and that sort of mindset, and always gravitated towards me, the wealth mindset of where you don't just see a career as a job, but you see a career, or you see the business organization itself and how it all works together, and the monetary side of that. So I've always been interested in that. I've always had some strength in the number side, so it came easy to gear a little bit more that way. And deciding to go to college, doing that, was very interested in business, and then finance was the most numbers oriented part. So I even took the finance side, not technically accounting, but having a lot of the same tools. So I've been more of a generalist accountant along the way. Never CPA, never public auditor or tax preparer, never quite that technical, but more the operational or commercial side of the numbers, and obviously understanding the accounting side itself too. Later, after my bachelor's, I got my certificate in management accountant from the Institute of Management Accountants.
Mm-hmm.
So this was more focused on different things that might come up in, say, a manufacturing environment where we're trying to like see what your pull through is, your variance analysis, all that sort of stuff that isn't required from like a end of year tax preparation situation, but you really need to know
Yeah.
it. Otherwise, you don't know where you're losing money in your production flows, et cetera. So for me, I sort of had that as
Yeah.
a professional background and wasn't quite sure where I want to go with it because I've always loved like talking the entrepreneur game, but I was never quite that rainmaker or visionary first person to just like go there out and make things happen. Part of me sort of figured out over time to use the EOS or entrepreneurial operating system language. I'm not really the visionary, though I talk visionary. I'm more of the integrator type. So I love working with visionaries, usually the CEOs of my companies, who always have those ideas for that
Mm-hmm.
additional growth. I help come alongside, not from a operating standpoint, but from more of a financial or corporate standpoint to help put and integrate and put together some of those pieces so that they, when they want the train to head in that direction, I can put some of the rails in place so they're not running into obstacles. But yeah, to get back to your question, so
Yeah.
my accounting was more academic in background. I got some operational experience in an office environment coming out of school. And
Mm-hmm.
then as I saw growth there, I sort of pivoted into more of a back office accounting role. But the favorite part of my job was not just, hey, let's put the monthly close together and send out the P&Ls, but more the sense of, okay, once that
Yeah.
foundation is done, what does that mean? How do I break that down by product class or by customer group? How do I talk with sales manager and say, hey, I'm seeing these three customer groups. This third group here, they're doing nothing for us and they're eating up even if each of these customers calls us once the whole month, they're eating more in overhead costs than they're
Mm-hmm.
giving us in revenue. So what are we doing here? Do we need to change that from a pricing standpoint or from a product scope standpoint? And so having some of those conversations started helping crystallize for me, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to focus on helping fill these gaps. And then so that was sort of my past in and in one sense a little bit out of accounting in my career.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I love that. I love that thinking. Putting the numbers, behind the, sometimes what is gut feeling, or revealing that truth. It's just like, hey, I think I've got this, this thing out here that's really, doing gangbusters and really a dog, for us. So that's awesome. That's awesome. What is the transition that you see? You talked about running. You alluded to the idea that running $1 million company is much different than a 5 million versus running a $10 million company. What do you see, and how are you guiding folks through those different phases?
Right. So I first was keyed into this with a college job that I had, where the CEO said every time a business doubles or triples in size, it breaks, and you have to sort of rebuild it. And some of that, it doesn't break necessarily from some of the individual jobs, but from the overall structure and how it comes together.
Hmm.
Just the volume changes, just qualitatively change it. So a smaller business, for example, the CEO can be the lead salesperson or the only salesperson. You get up beyond that where you start to have a certain amount of tickets going on. Pretty soon, maybe your website is the lead sales thing if it's more of a direct to consumer type approach. If it's bigger things and you're more focused on like the on the phone sales or more of a custom type approach, the CEO might still be the main rainmaker, but you probably have to have other salesperson. So it sort of changes from the CEO just being so passionate about their product and what they're doing and making it happen because they can pull the strings. They can say off the top of their head, yeah, I'll give you a 15% discount. They don't need to think about policy for any of that because they're the CEO.
Hmm.
So as you sort of externalize that and delegate that into a VP of sales or to begin with, just like a sales associate, you start to run into these questions of how does this work? And a lot of that is more then shit changes from the CEO being that lead salesperson to being more like the center of this hub where everybody's relying on them. And that's usually maybe a
Hmm.
little bit before I show up, and I show up a little bit later. But then the CEO starting to realize, hey, I'm the bottleneck of the organization. I used to be the founder, owner, operator that does everything. Now I'm the person that everybody
Hmm.
asks questions to, and so it's a very flat structure. And they have like a bookkeeper, sales associate, executive assistant, a couple of different people, perhaps on the installation or fulfillment side, whatever the product focus is. And then often the CEO is very
Hmm.
focused on those key customers or those very highly technical product things, depending on their background, if they're more of a sales relationship person or more of an operational person. So you sort of get that difference from like that self-employed idea potentially that starts that small to more of like the CEO being the bottleneck. But then trying to build out, okay, how do we formalize this? And it's a little bit more obvious to do maybe in the sales and operations side, because you can just keep on adding more people there. And those are that's the 80% of the company right there, is how do you sell it to your customers, and then how do you deliver it? And so the CEO is very focused on that, and you have the teams for that. But then pretty soon you're so focused on that and you've fixed every problem that you can see. Where I come in is, what are the problems that you don't see? And usually for people that are thinking of sell something, deliver it, sell, deliver, sell, deliver, pretty soon things like cash flow pop up and you're like, how do I evaluate this? Why are my profits saying this? Why is the bookkeeper saying this? But this doesn't make sense. I'm asking questions to my bookkeeper and nothing's coming back with clarity for me. That's when they start to realize, hey, the bookkeeper isn't enough. They're doing their job, but they're getting me to this level. I need to be at this level to keep on making the decisions I want to make, or to solve the pain points I'm feeling right now. So that's maybe a little bit of a qualitative example where finance starts to come in and may be a more obvious role compared to the finance of the founder, who's more like, hey, this is how much I have on payroll and this is how much I have in the bank account. So I'm doing some napkin math or back of the envelope math and just trying to think, how can I sell something and collect to make it work? And you're still really pushing on that when you get bigger, but it becomes much more complex because there's a lot of different moving parts. And so you can't just be looking at your books from a profit or tax perspective. You also have to be looking from a cash flow perspective. And that just starts to slowly creep up the complexity level of the business to the point where either the founder is working, a 70-hour-a-week job where they're working 30 to 40 hours of it in a zone of expertise because they are the product guy, they are the sales guy. But they're spending 20 to 30 hours working at an administrative junior bookkeeper level because they're not good at that. That's not been their training, but it falls on them because they understand the context and they have access to all the bank accounts, et cetera. So then often that's where I can come in, start to pick up some of that burden, give back to the founder some of that work-life balance that they want. They can put some of that time back into go get the next sale, or we can build out the structure so that they no longer have a ceiling. They have some of that focus or backup where they can go build out the sales team, go help, solidify operating processes. And with that, they can hit that next $1 million of revenue hurdle and then have enough overhead to cover to, cover the cost that I bring or the recommendations I make for the team or the ways that the team needs to build out to sort of help cover some of the administrative burden.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Yep, yep. What are some of the biggest challenges you see? I should say, what are the biggest pushbacks you see with founders and leaders as they're going through these different growth stages?
I think main pushback is like not really knowing what's available because again, they tend to be better versed with their customer. Like I'll come in, like I'm always going to be the rookie in the room. Like I'm going to come in to learn what is the specific nuances of your market, what's the specific nuances of how you deliver it. Now I've seen this a dozen different times or 35 times or whatever. So I start to learn fast and I see some things and I can clarify them back to the CEO, often even in the first 20 minutes that I'm talking with them where they're like, hey, you know what's going on. But they obviously know the nuances of what they see way better. But what they don't see necessarily is a business that's been where they're at and grown further. Because often these are not serial entrepreneurs who are working on their third business or fourth business. So somebody who's starting their first business, they're limited by their own experience and they just keep on building on that as much as they can. They haven't been through the full path. So like if we think big picture, from 1 million to 100 million, from a top line revenue, say in a service environment, like you think of like say a plumbing company or a dental clinic or whatever, where you have more last mile delivery, there's a lot of people involved. That tends to be some of my focus is more areas like that. Because you get into something that's more like internet data driven or manufacturing, often the bigger companies are winning big there because it's such a logistics hurdle that you want your, director of IT, you want things like that in place to even start to push the needle, or you're backpacking on things like AWS, Amazon platform, Facebook, Google, et cetera, to sort of do those things. And you're sort of helping just customize it for a nuanced part of the market. But anyway, so because of that, my focus tends to be in services where you have some of that face-to-face delivery. Like, to date, you can't really order a teeth cleaning or a cavity to be filled online yet. You're not relying on the Amazons and Facebooks of the world to do that for you. You're still going somewhere down the street where they're present there in Main Street in your town, even if your town is only 20,000 people. You've got that there. Probably even if there are only 5,000 people, you've got that there, or within 10 minutes of where you live, most likely. So that's more where I tend to gear, because I love that that's such a big sweet spot for, people like you and me are very similar to still sort of have a chance to play in the business landscape. It's not a business landscape that's 100% taken up by big government, big tech, big business, all the different ways that that plays, which I'm grateful for the strength they provide, but I'm grateful too that we still sort of have this space where it's a little bit Wild West. We can still sort of go out there, hustle, claim our own space, build our own tables, sort of figure out how we want it to go, and hopefully find that niche of customer that we can serve really well and give them something that they're not getting somewhere else. But anyways, with a owner or founder operating in that environment, for them, it's usually very experiential in what they're learning from this context. They haven't necessarily done the same thing professionally. Some of them do. Some people have built that 10, 20 years experience in a variety of roles, then they've gone entrepreneurial. But regardless of who does it, eventually you start to run to your limitations. Either you've run out of hours in the day, or you've just realized, hey, I am worth $200, $300, $500 an hour as a salesperson or as a culture leader in my business. I don't want to be spending 50 an hour, 100 hour, 150 an hour worth hours trying to figure out this administrative piece that I haven't fully figured out yet in my company. It's new to me, so I want to bring somebody else. So it's just a very classic example of the delegation. Then the new nuance here is that often the founder is very hands-on in the sales and the delivery side, and they understand the financial side, but it's more an extension of their personal finances. They haven't necessarily mastered it at some of the more technical or professional levels. So often that's maybe an area of pushback, is just the newness of it. Maybe one client that I've worked with has had previous, fractional CFOs that they've worked with. I tend to be a little bit more hands-on. I like to get into it and sort of cover both the senior accounting side, like a controller type role, along with the financial side of like the financial planning and analysis. But again, a lot of the founders that I end up working with, they more have that very dedicated professional background, like say a dentist or oral surgeon, or they've more grown up into the business like construction. They're more a GC type. They haven't come from a corporate America background. So they don't necessarily see what does a business look like at 20 million, 50 million, 80 million. Like they'll hear and they'll talk with their friends and stuff. So they see some of it, but it's not necessarily, maybe to put some language of it, like, you have the pursuit of winning right here is the name of the podcast. So one way that you can pursue something is if you can clearly visualize it. But if you've ever been there before for that size of company in the industry that you're in, and you're so busy with the other things you're going on, if you can't clearly see it, it's hard to go chase it. Compared to, for me, it's like I come from that background. I come having grown up within the finance track. And so I keep on trying to keep on learning how to clearly communicate, hey, let me figure out exactly where your business is. Let me figure out maybe some pain points you're feeling, and then let you show you this might be the 1, 2, or 3 things that would be the next step for you to put some additional financial IQ or systems into your business to help resolve some of the things that you're seeing. Because you're probably seeing, 5 to 10, 15 different pain points. But if I can find the 1 or 2 fixes that solve 8 of them, then that's really not something you're going to be looking for, because you don't understand how that fits, because that's not your background. But then for me, it's like trying to interpret what are you seeing and what's the underlying root cause here? How can we, make 1 or 2 small changes and cause, 5 or 6 of the symptoms that you're seeing go away and disappear, so that you can, move faster. You can decide, hey, before working with Ryan, I didn't quite know where we were going, so I was playing it safe. But now I know, and so I know that with our 90-day cash flow forecast, I can hire this next person because I know how that is going to translate into our cash balances, and I know that this person should be pulling their own weight and the overall business recipe is working. I'm comfortable with taking that risk. Compared to if you don't have that visibility and you're just looking at your daily bank balance and you're trying to play it safe, you might think, oh, well, I'll just put off the hire for another, 3 months, 6 months. Some people do the opposite. Usually the entrepreneurial mindset is, hey, I got an extra, $5,000 in the bank account, more than I was expecting. Let's just go hire the next person. But then if you're not thinking through it more rigorously, it could be the question, well, who's the next person to hire? Is it a salesperson? Is it a production person? Or is it time to realize that, a third of your calendar time is spent in menial tasks? Really think through, what does an executive assistant look like? Or what does upgrading your bookkeeping service look like, so that you're not spending so much time not just getting a report and then spending 2 hours trying to reinterpret it before you come to a conclusion, but having that built into your team so that you're getting the reports you need to see. And so you're already, you're spending less time trying to supplement the accounting systems of your business. You're spending more time being sort of that executive leadership and oversight approach when you're getting those reports and working with what you're seeing evolve in the month to month or week to week flow of your, business's cash and revenue and production and all that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. I would imagine, some of these folks, I mean, like you said, they're coming from more technical backgrounds. They're great at what they do, and they're running their companies essentially out of their bank accounts. I mean, how do you, they've, you've got to, I imagine you have to teach them, about, their financial reports and what it means. And, that, like you said, that 90-day cash flow projections and, I mean, all of those conversations, I mean, what does it take for you?
Yeah, it's definitely iterative. I haven't just sort of like stabbed out like here's my approach, here's my steps that I process it through, which maybe I will over time, especially if I scale my own business. For now, it's more like how do I plug myself into your business and go from there. But yeah, it just becomes this conversation of trying to based off of the words that they're saying, signaling to me what level of understanding they're at. Like you're saying, I love how you say it too.
Yeah.
It's like, these people have technical excellence or they have industry super high level nuance. So it's definitely not an intelligence issue, and often it's not a attention issue because they want to pay attention to it, but it becomes a bandwidth issue and becomes an expertise issue because we can't all be experts in everything. And that's part of the part that I love here is like, I put right in my title, Group CFO. Like a lot of people say fractional CFO. I think of it as group because for two reasons. One reason is like, because I'm not working full time for any one company, I get to see my group of clients together. And I thought I get to see multiple perspectives into the same HR, operational, sales dynamics. So I'm getting multiple hits all the time. Like somebody working in one company, they get much more in depth and they're much more involved with their work group, and that's great. For me, I'm a little bit one step removed, but I get to see 3, 5, 10 at a time, and with that sort of gives me a window into a broader network, a broader perspective into the industry. But the group side from the company is I'm not working with solo outfits anymore. The business has grown beyond one person. They're pulling in the leader of their production or their sales lead, or maybe they're big enough where they're starting to call one of those COO and they're calling themselves CEO. Like they're starting to realize it's a group. It's more of a management team that's emerging, and that's what's required at that level, because it's no longer hey, I'm just trying to get really process oriented. I personally write all the SOPs for everybody, and every single person that I hire is entry level and they just plug into my business system and run it. There's maybe a few businesses out there that work that way, but most businesses have a little bit more hierarchy and structure where you have the entry level people coming in and learning their things, but then you also realize the value of the experienced people that could come in and handle some of the more judgment calls themselves, or more like the department leads, production leads. So you realize, hey, I don't no longer have to figure this out and tell somebody exactly what to do, and something goes wrong, they come back to me. I have this teammate, I have this partner, I have this, director or manager on my team, and they can handle all of that, or they can handle, 80, 95% of it. That's really what I often see. You start to see those different organizational structures come up. And then the hard part with finance is usually a smaller business starts to run into lots of financial problems once they turn this corner, but they're not quite big enough then to afford a full-time professional level controller, at 6 figures a year starting, to really understand the full picture and be able to give them the solid accounting and go from there. So I like to come in with that at a part-time basis, more or less, and then that sort of helps them keep their expenses low because they don't really need that, and I can still handle that level of volume because, their overall processes are not, they're not yet to the 50 million a year, 100 million a year, $1 billion a year, where they need the level of technical expertise or bandwidth or teams built out for them. And so I can still sort of plug in and help where they might have potentially a full-time bookkeeper on staff, and they usually have their CPA to help them with end-of-year filings, quarterly filings. I just could sort of help it, jump in there, plug the gaps, help understand where their CPAs, usually CPAs that they tend to work with tend to be pretty good. Often bookkeepers are a little bit more rote in what they do. And so there's often a disconnect between like the bookkeeping accounting mindset and the owner manager mindset.
Mhm.
And I can come in and sort of fill the
Mhm.
gap and sort of communicate the differences and help coach those bookkeepers.
Mhm.
Hey, for this company, for this client they were working with, this is what we're really looking for. This is what will be helpful, and I can help leverage them. So some of my projects have been more short term, and so there's always that option of me coming into a
Mhm.
company, sort of helping them work with who they have, and saying, hey, currently you're doing more
Mhm.
of a bank-based P&L. Well, here, let's make these couple changes. Now you have a little bit better, inventory tracking or revenue forecasting or cash flow or whatever, and then if they figure that out and that's
Mhm.
enough for them, great. That my job might be done, and maybe they'll call me another 6 months later once they've grown enough that they've run to the next problem. So there's definitely that interplay or optionality
Mhm.
for just sort of stepping into the gaps, which I love to do, and it sort of helps them again because the big problems are how do you get that next customer and how do you deliver and fulfill. So
Yeah.
you want full-time people making that happen. The financial side is like you don't want to spend the full time on that because that's going to blow up your cost structure for what you need. Bringing the fractional or virtual or part-time associate like myself can help sort of solve
Yeah.
that at a level that's appropriate. Because last thing I want to do is like if I see some of these books and I see the solution that I can provide them, it's going to cost me, 5-10 grand to fulfill for them, but it's only really can help them, a couple grand because
Uh-huh.
of where their margins are at. And it's like, no, I have no interest in working that situation because I don't really feel like I'm pushing the business forward. Compared to when you see the opposite happening, where it's like, hey, if I can come in, even if it's my total engagement fee is going to cost, 10, 15 grand, or perhaps we set up a recurring thing where I look like
Mhm.
a potentially full-time employee on the staff from the full-time entry level position. But if that sort of helps unlock them to go to get that next 20, 30% revenue growth without the business falling apart and saves them from compliance issues, tax issues, cash flow issues, that's a huge win of reducing that risk. And then I can see that
Yeah.
the business can pay for it. And the CEO just has that ability to keep on taking the next steps forward of what they're good at to do. So it's fun to sort of come in and do that. And I definitely don't want to insert myself someplace where I'm not valuable. I don't want to, because I do love sort of seeing that ongoing relationship build. Um, but I do have a lot more flexibility to do that as opposed to somebody with my same skill set that's looking for a full-time job just because, I don't need you to match my market rate in the job market to get me. You just need to be able to sort of contribute whatever portion of that relative to the bandwidth that the role is going to require.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. So it's like highly bespoke, highly customized, just based on where the business is, the needs of the business. Do you typically, are you the person that typically recommends, like, hey, you need to bring in a COO or you need to bring in, XYZ other role? Is that, part of your, I guess, evaluation or something that might come out of your evaluation?
Yeah, it's interesting how fast trust can be built. Like it's really often just one or two projects. Sometimes I get a lot of trust
Yeah.
given to me even after one or two conversations where they're like, "Yeah, you know what you're talking about. I trust your take on this." But it's often after like one project of having implemented something or having sort of gone through a quarter or something where we've seen something, we've done analysis, we've decided to take action, and then we've seen the result. And once we see a little bit of that happening, then there
Hmm.
definitely is a huge growth in the validity of that trust. Then at that point, yeah, often the CEO is more like hey, you're the person besides me that's sort of like that insider outsider view. I'm an insider enough because I'm familiar with the industry rhythms and I see the books and
Hmm.
I'm sort of know enough of the operational sales things going on to understand it more than just a hypothetical business of the same size and type. And I also sort of come to it from that outsider perspective because I've seen other businesses either in similar situations, bigger, smaller, et cetera. So I've seen those. I've seen more like I've had more reps in this similar neighborhood as opposed to the business owner who has had that one rep of, hey, this is their business that they've built. So they know it much deeper, but I have a little bit more of a broad perspective on it. So yeah, that definitely pairs well to them starting to say, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I love that maybe, I think one time I was looking at the main things that I do, and I think about half of what I do, it's not really properly termed accounting or finance. It's more, what is the accounting or finance perspective that connects to HR, that connects to sales, that connects to operations? Because when I come in, it's like one way I look at it is, if I was just an accountant talking with other accountants all day long, I'd be bored. Like, that's not me. So I love to sort of see that vantage point, but I want to be speaking operations language. I want to be speaking the sales language and putting in terms that resonate with them. And I love business enough that I can do that, that even if they, aren't the type, and I've run into this many times, like, especially if you've ever volunteered with nonprofits, you'll know this, like budget meetings are not fun for most people. They're fun for me, but like, I realize that for most people, that's a chore and that's a headache. But I can flip it around where it's like, I speak their language. I understand what they want out of it, what information I need from them. And I can sort of do that interfacing work so that they get to sort of stay in their area of competence, and they get the answers that they need. They get the resources that they need to do their job really well. And that's really what they're looking for. That's what the manager or the department head is looking for, or even the employee. And I get to sort of see some of the core of what's going on at the overall business level to help provide that. So yeah, for sure. And sometimes for companies, it becomes, I'm going to be a little bit more focused on the accounting department right now because I want to upskill them, or I want to put the system in place. And then I want to add that FP&A layer so that you're not just asking me, every once in a while, oh, what about this? And I answer you, compared to on a consistent monthly or quarterly basis. I'm just giving you those reports. So I'm seeing the full picture, and I'm seeing the 8 things that I want to see, and not just the 2 things that you're asking me to look for, so I can give you that full picture. But often then that leads to, yes, this exposes, and the next gap is, all of our line managers are so busy because we have turnover and recruiting is taking a while. Well, what would it look like to develop a stronger HR recruiting relationship, or bring in an HR person to sort of just lead the pipeline on that, so we constantly have new talent knocking on our door and we have that availability, and then the HR person sort of handle 80% of the work for there. Then we can turn it over to line manager and pass it over. That's really how a business grows, is you keep on dialing back and thinking, what are we doing a lot of? And how do we make sure that people are doing what they do best most of their workday? So if you take somebody that is very, very, like a regional manager of some sort, or like a division manager, they're really good at their operation, but they keep on getting pulled into other things. Well, what are those other things that we can help them delegate to somebody else, or how we can cancel them, or we can give them better tools or processes, or we can give them permission to say, no, that's not our target customer. You are allowed to say no to them. Focus on what we're good at, And so that simplicity of saying no, and that might be a little tip I have for those listening here. If you've had the discipline of saying no in a lot of your operations, you can get laser focused on a specific customer set, specific fulfillment channel, and specific product line service. If you do that, your business will always be so laser focused that you as a CEO might never need me. And you should be getting above $1 million a year in doing that, where you can run the business, and just a little bit of self-education, or maybe having an occasional phone call with a friend in the network, might be more than enough for what you need. Potentially there's still some help where a fractional CFO could help you, but really, as long as you are committed to keeping the business laser focused, you can understand what's going on with it. But often you're starting to see opportunities because you're a visionary, and you're like, hey, I'm serving this clientele here. What if I sent one of my managers to the next city over and did that there? Now all of a sudden you have 2 locations that you're serving. Or you're like, hey, we're really great with this target market or this channel. What if we opened up a second store or a second channel? Like, hey, we have a digital environment. What about a storefront environment? Like, the moment you start to do that, it's going to just really add a lot of complexity to your business. So I just recommend do that from a place of strength. Make sure you know what your core is, and that you're doing really well on that. And then so that if something happens, you know what the core is, and you know what the sort of the experimental growth option is. But eventually, if like most of those seem to be doing pretty well, that's potentially when you need somebody like me or somebody on your team to step up and sort of say, hey, we're doing these 3 different things, but it all gets muddled and packaged together. When I look at the monthly P&L, I don't know which of the 3 is winning and losing and just keeping its head above water. But when you start to have the right numbers and right tracking, you can get some signals to that. If that starts to be a bear or a chore of how to figure that out, that's potentially when somebody with a little bit more of the finance background, potentially depending on your data environment, somebody with more of a data analysis background can start to see some of those operational cues of this is working, this isn't. But ultimately you have to, if you really want to run a sophisticated environment where you have a complex business, and by complex I mean you're beyond the one customer, one fulfillment line, one production platform, et cetera, but you have multiple things going on, you are going to at some point need the appropriate data and financial data. Usually the way that that's done is through traditional accounting methods, but not just the accounting from a government standpoint, but the managerial accounting there to sort of layer it into, are we taking our transactions appropriately? Are we understanding what dollars go with what? Because like you don't want to build something to double your revenue if it only adds 10% to your profit. That's a huge waste of time. You could just grow your core thing by 20% or 30% and potentially have the same profit result compared to starting something brand new. So really understanding how that breaks down is often the goal of what the insight that I bring, or like sort of the tools and techniques that I have in my toolbox sort of help to apply to a company, to whether they're running QuickBooks or whether I've moved them into something that's more holistic, like a Sage, that's more enterprise level accounting software, to really being able to see that. So just one example of that, a client I'm working with, they have over 10 entities all sort of together in a portfolio. And from a revenue level, we had a great Q1. From a profit level, we just did okay. And so what's the difference? If you're still in the mindset of, hey, this is what the business is, you think it's an average business. But I can easily break it down by location because we've built and the owner has for years now committed to sort of that entity level accounting approach. And because of that, I can see that, 6 or 7 of the entities had a great quarter, and 4 or 5 of them are still pretty weak and just sort of need some life support to help them along. So if we don't see that, the CEO doesn't know what to do. But with that in view, this is something that is not a surprise to me because I've seen some of the same things in Q4 and Q3. I can keep on telling them, hey, here's our key strategic focuses, is these 3-4 things in play. But what do we have strategically in plan to re-equip or reconfigure the profit recipe or the volume or the team in these areas so that they can stop holding the company back and start pushing the company forward. So the moment you get into that sort of multi-entity or multi-location or multi-product environment, you need specific, at the least specific metrics that sort of give you a key to the health of each part of the system. And if you have that, or you've been able to build that, great. If you find that that becomes a huge load on you and you're wanting to spend more time building the system and less time tracking the system, then potentially somebody like myself, or there's somebody in your team that can be coached up to do that, or somebody like myself can come in from the outside to help build that for you.
Brilliant, man. Brilliant. I love this stuff. I really do. I was working on a dual degree. So I was like 90% finished my degree for my MBA. And they're like, hey, if you take 3 more courses, you can get you can have a finance major as well. I was exhausted, dude. 3 years, around the clock. I was just like, all right, we're done. But I really enjoy like building financial models and all of that all of that stuff that goes along with that. What you shared is really gold. I mean, really, I think that a listener that's or a viewer that's in that space in their business, there are a lot of gaps that people just they don't know sometimes that there are even gaps. So if someone wanted to have a conversation with you and say, hey, Ryan, I think I know what I'm doing, but I'd like to get your thoughts, get your eyes on that. How can they reach out to you?
Sure. My website is soundfinance.pro. The link should be somewhere available wherever this podcast, where you get this podcast, but soundfinance.pro. And you can easily find a spot there to jump on my calendar and come say hi and then just talk about your business. Even if you're not a good fit for me, I'm more than happy to sort of have that conversation as time allows. Like if I get all loaded up, I might have to, cancel or reschedule you for another week later on. But would love to chat and talk. And if there's like a good fit, or you're sort of seeing that question, often it becomes, a few of those conversations to talk with prospects to see where they are. And then for the ones where it's a good fit, we, go figure something out, put a project in place, or get a retainer down so that I can start to get to know the team and start to put some of those like first wins for you together. But yeah, for sure, Sound Finance, soundfinance.pro, PRO, and then just go there. You can sort of see a little bit more about me, a little bit more about my background, and then get my contact info there. Find me on LinkedIn. But the quickest way, if you want, it's just there's a calendar icon there, and you can go book yourself a spot. We can just have a conversation about your business and see what's up.
Awesome. 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 And you have a giveaway, a PDF guide?
Well, also on that, so if you do reach out and you're interested, there is a little tutorial talking about like some of the different layers of accounting and finance, how that applies for your business. So if you want that as a resource that you can look into, just reach out, get a conversation with me. And if that looks interesting to you, I'm more than happy to send you that PDF as well, so that you sort of have a way to think about this that isn't just related to, spending face time with me, et cetera. But it's something that you can sort of use and sort of maybe potentially begin some of that strategic thought around how do you build out your team, or maybe you decide, hey, this, like you're saying, Rick, maybe this is interesting to you. Maybe you found that you really nailed it on the sales and operational side, and you want to give yourself an education. Like maybe this is one part of that, as you're like learning from other sources too. You're probably an avid podcast listener if you're seeing this, hearing this with us, just another sort of brick in the structure that you're building. So yeah, more than happy to get that over to you for those that reach out.
Awesome. 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 Ryan, thank you so much. This has been educational. It's been wonderful. I enjoyed myself.
Appreciate the questions and love being able to say the story. Glad to be able to be in this space and help the ones out that end up being a good fit, and hope that those that, I don't get to talk with further. Glad to hear that it's been educational. Hope that a lot of the listeners have gained a lot from it too. So appreciate being here.
Awesome. Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Holden. Take care.